Seguidamente,
the Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Faustin-Archange Touadéra, Head of State of the Central African Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale,
President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a renewed honor for me to be taking the floor here before the entire world, speaking on behalf of my beautiful country, the Central African Republic. I am speaking with a view to contributing to the general debate on the theme of this 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Through its participation in the General Assembly, the Central African Republic is reaffirming its commitment to contributing to our joint pursuit of trust, peace, security, international solidarity, and mutual understanding, all of which are indispensable if we are to build a peaceful world that's conducive to sustainable development and the respect for human dignity, the human dignity of generations past and future, present and future. Before I proceed, I'd like to extend to His Excellency, Mr. Philemon Yang, our heartfelt congratulations. Congratulations on his shining and historic election to preside over the proceedings of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Your election is the symbol of an honor and well-deserved tribute that's been granted to our continent, Africa. Your election is also a source of great pride and inspiration for 51 million citizens of CEMAC, the Economic and Monetary Community of Central Africa, which I'm currently presiding over, steering the work of the Conference of the CEMAC Heads of State. It is also a source of pride and inspiration for your beautiful country, the sister Republic of Cameroon. Your consummate knowledge of international affairs, as well as your far-ranging personal qualities, are a great advantage and a guarantee that our proceedings will be met with success. I stand convinced that you will do your best to serve the interests of the United Nations and all its member states, implementing the UN's vast reform program so that the organization becomes more effective, more inclusive, more representative, and better suited to our changing world, as well as to the resolution of the serious and pressing problems shaking all of humanity. Rest assured, you have the full support of the Central African Republic in your task. I'd also like to commend the high caliber of the work done and the accomplishments of President Denis Francis throughout the 78th session of the General Assembly. We extend to Mr. Denis Francis our gratitude and our satisfaction. United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, I'd like to reiterate to you the gratitude of the Central African Republic and my country's full support, as well as the support of the government. We support your various initiatives which seek to make the United Nations a place where the efforts of nations come together. As you know, on the 30th of July of this year, the United Nations Security Council decided to lift in its entirety the unjust, illegitimate, and iniquitous arms embargo that had been imposed on the Central African Armed Forces for a decade. An embargo which caused us irreparable harm over those 10 years. Speaking from this rostrum, I'd like to extend to you the gratitude of the Central African people. We are grateful to the UN Security Council for its wise decision, a decision which, although belated, will allow my country to continue to act so as to rebuild international and national peace and security, and to work together with other states in the pursuit of peace, sustainable development, and the human dignity of present and future generations. I'd like to seize this opportunity to reiterate to all of you, all those who held the Central African Republic in their hearts and supported our noble fight. You have the gratitude of our people. The Central African Republic has vast mining potential. Therefore, I'm convinced that we'll continue to receive your support for the lifting of the embargo on diamonds imposed by the Kimberley Process, an embargo which has circumscribed our ability to work for peace, sustainable development, and the human dignity of present and future generations. Mr. President, the theme of this 79th General Assembly session is leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations. The theme is tied up with particularly important, significant recommendations, which will be of import in our discussions on the reform of the global peace and security architecture, as well as our discussions geared towards achieving the SDGs. As we know, peace is inextricably linked to sustainable development. Regrettably, as we meet here at this great world forum, year in, year out, as we meet at other fora for that matter, the world continues grappling with serious existential threats, becoming more unstable and more vulnerable. This 79th session is taking place at a very turbulent time, a time marked by mounting geopolitical crises, the war between Russia and Ukraine, the war between Israel and Hamas, the war in Sudan and in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, terrorism, deteriorating economic conditions which are strangling growth in Africa, as well as rising fuel prices. We stand convinced that only dialogue can help us to put an end to conflict in a lasting way. The Central African Republic implores the parties to these various conflicts to opt for dialogue and diplomacy so as to find a solution to the various disagreements at the root of these conflicts and to save millions of human lives. The Central African Republic would like to note that the security situation has been stable for the most part in 2024. We are preparing to deepen our democratic roots by holding municipal and regional elections in the very near future, something that will be a first over the last 4 decades. With this in mind, special measures have been taken to apprehend remaining armed groups. These groups can no longer control various portions of our country's territory. As a result, they're engaging in organized crime, illegal exploitation, and fraudulent trafficking of natural resources, and they're doing this so as to be able to acquire military material and equipment. The 10th session of the Strategic Committee for Disarmament, Demobilization, Reintegration and Rehabilitation, as well as the commemoration in Bangui of African Amnesty Month by the African Union's Peace and Security Council, this happened just a few days ago, were an opportunity for us to fully appreciate the significant headway that's been made and which has been possible thanks to the fact that stakeholders have taken ownership and participated in the global peace and security process underpinned by the Political Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation, as well as the Luanda Joint Roadmap. Despite of the progress that's been made, the Central African Republic continues to grapple with various challenges, specifically as regards the building of barracks, so we can station units in defense areas close to the places from which threats are emanating, as well as the acquisition of military material and equipment for our defense and security forces. Mr. President, climate change is having very serious repercussions. Deadly flooding, drought, and large-scale fires, which we've witnessed all over the world. These give rise to various risks, from food insecurity to water stress to competition for natural resources, as well as losses of livelihoods and displacement. These interdependent, cascading risks can have very serious knock-on effects on peace, security, and development across continents. In sub-Saharan Africa, which is the epicenter of humanitarian crises, environmental disasters have resulted, this year alone, in over 1,000 deaths and 4 million climate refugees, not to mention invaluable material damage, specifically in our neighboring country, Chad, where the number of victims continues to grow following heavy rain, which prompted large-scale flooding and compelled people to evacuate. Speaking from this high rostrum, the United Nations, a symbol par excellence of human solidarity, to express the solidarity of the Central African people to people all over the world who have been hard hit by natural disasters. Our world is being rattled by bloody conflicts. It's also threatened from time to time by deadly weather events, devastating weather events. And in this world, developing countries, which have been impoverished by centuries of slavery, colonialism, and neocolonialism characterized by multifaceted meddling in their domestic affairs, unjust raw materials prices, onerous conditionalities imposed through the international financial architecture. These developing countries are looking on powerlessly as new security, financial, economic, food-related, and environmental challenges mount. Funding promises for vulnerable countries are taking time to come to fruition. Adaptation measures promised at various COPs and rising temperatures, all of these are changing as often as the weather does, beholden to the political, geopolitical, and geostrategic whims of the great powers. We're well aware of just how dangerous climate phenomena are. Thus, my country has crafted sector-specific policies. However, their effectiveness depends on climate funding, which is still unreliable. The Central African Republic would like to urge the United Nations to do more to implement the climate peace and development nexus, establishing synergies between climate adaptation and peace building, so as to holistically address the vulnerabilities linked to climate change, other vulnerabilities, and the risk of conflict. Mr. President, the world is teetering dangerously close to the brink. The UN peace and security architecture is being subjected to enormous pressure. The reasons Africa put forward in support of its request for legitimate Security Council reform and reform to the veto system are very compelling. A step forward has been taken by the United States of America. The US has endorsed the establishment of 2 permanent seats for Africa on the Security Council, as well as a rotating seat for small island developing states, SIDS. This proposal is praiseworthy, of course, but given changes afoot in our world, Africa, which has for a long time remained on the sidelines, cannot be fully satisfied with this proposal, which can only be viewed from the vantage point of a perpetual denial of the veto to Africa. It is time to speed up the reform of the international financial architecture so as to remedy inequality, to mobilize adequate funding for the achievement of the SDGs, to meet the financing needs of developing countries, to be able to reform the implementation of and compliance with multilateral environmental agreements, which will help us to make our common ambition of protecting the planet a reality. Mr. President, demographic estimates indicate that in 2050, half of the world's global youth will live in Africa. Also, half of Africa's 54 countries would have seen their populations almost double. I applaud the Pact for the Future, as well as the Global Digital Compact and the Declaration on Future Generations, annexed thereto, all of which were adopted at the Summit of the Future. It is high time that we speed up the implementation of the SDGs in the following areas: science, technology, innovation, and digital cooperation. We should do this whilst stressing equity, rights, and universality. Young people today are key agents of positive change. They can make an important contribution to sustainable development, respect for human rights, as well as global peace and security. And yet young people are vulnerable for a number of reasons. This is preventing young people from realizing their full potential and exercising their fundamental rights. It therefore behooves us to pledge to transform investment in young people, in women, girls, and persons with disability, so as to guarantee a better future for us all. As for the Central African Republic, our ambitious 2024-2028 National Development Plan strikes a better balance between the needs and interests of present and future generations. It does this by making human capital development one of the plan's strategic pillars. To conclude, I hope that the spirit that prompted the establishment of the United Nations will tirelessly prevail, thereby helping to create a fertile atmosphere for resolving the problems plaguing international peace and security, sustainable development, and this for the benefit of all humanity. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the head of the State of the Central African Republic.